In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, who came in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom all holy praise is due. We forever praise and we thank him for raising in our midst the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, the Messiah of exalted Christ. And we further bear witness that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is Allah's divine servant and warner, the spirit of truth and comforter in our midst. We thank Allah for the most honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, our divine leader, teacher, and guide in our midst today. This particular talk is on a subject, this multi-timely subject, an aspect of the teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. This part of the teaching that has been dismissed and has been derided because of the magnitude of the impact of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. Parts of his teaching has been laughed at. Today we're going to confirm a particular aspect of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching dealing with the original man and the evidence of the deportation of the moon. In 2010 I did a particular lecture called The Evidence of the Deportation of the Moon. This could be called Part 2, The Evidence and Proof of the Teachings of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that 66 trillion years ago there was a particular scientist who wanted the peoples of the earth to speak one language or one particular dialect. He tried to bring about an unnatural possibility on the planet. And so this particular scientist, he tried to destroy us. So he drilled a shaft into the then called moon or earth. At that time, the earth was not 25,000 miles in circumference or 7,926 miles in diameter. The most honorable Elijah Muhammad said at that time that it was 10,000 miles in diameter and 35,000 miles in circumference. So this particular scientist drove or drilled a shaft to the center of the then called moon or earth, which was 5,000 miles. Because we know that the radius is 1/2 the diameter, so if the diameter of the earth then was 10,000 miles, we know 1/2 the diameter would be 5,000, which is the radius. So this particular scientist drove a shaft 5,000 miles into the center of the then called moon. He set it off and he blasted away the piece called moon. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that the moon was blasted 12,000 miles into space, and the earth dropped 36,000 miles into the particular pocket that it is now in. At that particular time, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that all the water, the plant life, the vegetation, everything that was on that part, it took 6 weeks for it to fall to this part, the waters of the moon at that time. This is where you get the myths and the deluge stories that you read about, the lost city of Atlantis that we're going to talk about and so forth in this presentation. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said originally there were 13 tribes of the original black man on the planet. And that cataclysmic thermonuclear catastrophic event, it took place 66 trillion years ago. One tribe was destroyed. And the tribe that resettled the planet after the explosion was the tribe of Shabazz, which we're going to explore also in Honorable Elijah Muhammad's teaching in relation to the deportation of the moon. What's the evidence that we want to deal with today? We're going to deal with the scientific evidence to prove what the most honorable Elijah Muhammad was taught by God himself. 1972, in a very important work, Michael Overton discovered or talked about a very important law. It's called Bode's Law. Discovered by a man in 1772. His name was Daniel Titus. Daniel Titus said of the 6 known planets at that particular time, Daniel Titus had made the discovery that between Mars and Jupiter there was a space just enough to hold a giant-sized planet. His hypothesis was based on the fact that between Mars and Jupiter today, there is an asteroid belt. This asteroid belt that exists between Mars and Jupiter has explosive signatures on it. Daniel Titus and his Bode's Law and others that have come up with the exploded planet hypothesis has demonstrated that that asteroid belt could be the leftover remnants of a giant planet that had exploded billions of years ago. Exactly what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us, because remember, Mars was the moon of our planet. And therefore, these asteroids or minor planets are nothing more than the leftover debris and remnants of our proto-Earth or planet Earth, Asia, or moon that existed between Mars and Jupiter. Michael Overton in 1972 said, these asteroids or minor planets were remnants of a giant-sized planet that exploded, blasting debris into our solar system. Tom Van Flanders, in a very important work called Dark Matter, Missing Planets and New Comets, in 1993, he says, and I quote, the asteroid orbit possesses explosion signatures, patterns first cataloged for orbits of fragments of artificial Earth satellites that blew up around the Earth and are indicative of a common origin at one point in space at one instance of time. There are explosion signatures on the asteroid belt that existed today between Mars and Jupiter, because between Mars and Jupiter, as scientists have come up with the proof to bear witness to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that was the place where our Earth originally existed in its original pocket before it was blasted into the pocket that it now rotates into this very day. J.R. Gabbard and F. Mazzarri, on page 125 of their important work, and also 39 through 49, they say, and I quote, some asteroid orbits, most notably the Trojan asteroids near Jupiter's orbit, are not stable for time spans as long as 1 billion years and cannot be original members of the solar system. In other words, this asteroid belt that exists between Mars and Jupiter was not originally part of our solar system, which proves that they are recent. What did the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad have to say about Mars? In Philadelphia in 1962, the exalted Christ, the Lamb of God, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, Mars had been serving as a moon for our Earth before the making of the present moon. Mars was our moon when the Earth existed in its original pocket before that explosion that was set off by our scientists 66 trillion years ago, and that enormous blast put us or took us away from our pocket in which Mars originally was our moon. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said in 1964, in a very important interview with Buzz Anderson, he said, and I quote, at that time, according to the teachings of God to me, we had Mars as our moon. It served as our moon before this scientist tried to destroy us. Now, this is the red planet, Mars. As we were taught in our lesson, which is 141,500,000 miles from the sun. When that explosion to this interspatial, intergalactic thermonuclear event took place that was set off by our scientists 66 trillion years ago, as taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, not only was Mars shifted out of its original pole, it was shifted 90 degrees, but some of the debris from the Earth hit Mars, causing the cratering on Mars in the southern region of Cydonia, and some of the parts of the southern region was leafed with some of the debris from that explosion. Also, water from the earth also hit the red planet, but because of its close proximity at that time to our earth, it created flood channels and flood erosions, and these flood channels and flood erosions are indicative or indicative of the fact that Mars originally served as our moon when the earth was in its original pocket, and some of the materials from the earth struck Mars. Now, G.E. McGill, S.W. Squires, talks about and says the southern crust is so much more than the northern crust of mass, and is offset from its center by 3.6 kilometers. Moreover, a thick southern crust drops abruptly to the level of northern lowlands, with the surface sloping down 4 or 5 kilometers in a span of just a few hundred kilometers near the present equator. There are two very large, relatively well-preserved impact basins on the bombarded southern plains. The 2,000 kilometer diameter of the Hellas basins is 43 degrees south, 291 degrees west. 1,200 kilometer diameter of the Ogren basin is 50 degrees south, 42 degrees west. Numerous other large craters. The southern Martian craters have ejecta and saturated with water, giving them a mud-like consistency. Also, this picture is indeed very much as the exploded planet hypothesis with Mars as a nearby moon would expect. The actual data for Mars are so close to expectation that one would see evidence that many of the impacts on the southern hemisphere near the equator were northward directing gazing impacts. That's from Strom's, Croft, and Barlow in 1992. And it indicates that the cratering on Mars is more diverse than any planet or satellite in the solar system. Since Mars was our moon originally, it was in it was synchronized, if you will, pardon me, and locked in its particular view. So because it was faced towards the earth, much of what you see on the southern region is from that explosion, not on the northern region. These are the anomalies, man-made anomalies on Mars that the white man talks about. This is the face, just to digress for a minute, to add on to our subject. This is the face on southern Cydonia. This is not from no dust. This is not from no weather. This is a man-made structure on Mars. This face also, man-made structure on Mars. As the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us, when the white man gets to Mars, he will not find any mark of his. Here is the pyramid and the structures in southern Cydonia, or the complex. Here you see the D and M pyramid here, and the face and the southern region. There's a movie out that came out years ago with Don Cheadle called Mission to Mars. And in Mission to Mars, Don Cheadle is an astronaut that gets stranded on Mars, and of course they go up there to get him. They find this tall, dark race of people, and they talk about, they show this face, and subsequently they show the southern region called Cydonia, which is a real place on Mars, and that is the place that you find these anomalies. What did the Honorable Elijah Muhammad say about this? In Theology of Time in 1972, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, and I quote, "When he sees what's on Mars, he won't see no mark of his. It's our Mars, our people, so God taught me. They are intelligent people. The marks that we see on Mars are not from ignorant, silly, uncivilized people. They show signs of civilization, and they look something similar to us. Not exactly, but they look similar. They walk on 2 feet, and they're not white folks." So, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, he teaches us that there is a race of people, the original people, as Honorable Elijah Muhammad said in some lessons, that the original man has pictures of the people on Mars that stand 8 to 9 feet tall, and they are original people, and they are not white folks. And the enemy knows this. Dr. Wesley Muhammad, in his earth-shattering classic book, and timely classic, The Book of God, the encyclopedia proof that the black man is God, in 2007, Dr. Wesley Muhammad says, and I quote, and this is very important, not only was Mars affected The present moon was produced, the asteroid belt, but also some dark carbonaceous blast material hit one of Saturn's moons, Iapetus. And that carbonaceous dark soot, that blast wave of material from that explosion exists on one of Saturn's moons to this day. Dr. Wesley Muhammad says Mars was affected and Saturn also affected by this interspatial explosion. This explosion sent a blast wave of dark carbonaceous matter, completely vaporized material mixed with ash and soot throughout the solar system, coating all atmosphereless bodies such as Iapetus, Saturn's moon, which is completely covered on one side with this dark material. Saturn's atmosphereless moon is icy bright on one side and cold black on the other, showing the result of that blast material from the explosion. Next part of my presentation. What about the moon rock evidence? They brought back samples of rock evidence from the moon and found that those rocks that they brought back from the moon is the same as the rocks from the earth. What did the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad say about that? In his book, his earth-shattering classic, The Flag of Islam, on page 9, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, and I quote, "The moon's mass or essence is of the same as this earth. It is from the earth." The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said in the Theology of Time in 1972, he came, meaning God himself, came and taught us what the moon was and how it came about. Then he let the devil go up there and test it to see if whether or not the matter from the moon corresponded with the matter of the earth. The devil found this to be true because he brought back rocks from the moon and compared them to the rocks from the earth. The only difference was that the rocks from the earth are saturated with water, and those rocks from the moon doesn't have any water but used to. Der-Chung Lee from the University of Michigan in 1997, in a very important article called Age and Origin of the Moon, he says, and I quote, "Lunar samples show that the moon and earth have similar quantities of oxygen isotopes, suggesting a close kinship between the two. And tungsten rock samples from the moon's surface, and in 1997 it was announced that the tungsten isotope composition is consistent with the hypothesis that the moon was derived from the earth, just as the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us. When the earth and the moon was one planet and existed in its original pocket before that detonation or that splitting away that happened 66 trillion years ago. They found 3 elements on the moon and depleted in the earth that prove these 3 elements prove the close relationship of the moon's origin from the earth. A. Ringwood in 1994, in his petitioning of chromium, vanadium, and manganese between mantles and cores of differentiated planetismals, implications for giant impact hypothesis of lunar origin, he says, and I quote, "The proto-lunar material derived mainly from the Earth's mantle," which prove again and bear witness to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad that the moon derived from the inner mantle and material of the Earth's crust. Tom Van Flanders in 1993, again in his book Dark Matters, Missing Planets, he says, "We know that the moon shares certain properties with the Earth's crust, which are unlikely to have arisen unless the moon was indeed once a part of that crust." Next part of my presentation. There are 3 theories concerning the moon's origin. 3 theories. We're going to touch and debunk these real quick. I could go into them in detail, but time will not permit it. There are 3 theories. And these 3 theories is what the white man has came up trying to explain away the revelation that God taught the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, which they are fast proving that what he taught us on the origin of the moon is right and exact. And his astrophysicists, his scientists are proving and bearing witness every day to the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. But these three theories that they have came up with have been around for a while is the giant impact theory, the capture theory, and the fission theory. Let's look at it. What is the giant impact theory? According to these scientists, the giant impact theory was that a large-sized meteor impacted or hit the Earth, ejecting the material into orbit, which eventually accreted into the moon. The only problem with that theory is this. Robert Cannon and Larry Esposito in 1996 wrote a very important article. It's called Accretion of the Moon from an Impact-Generated Disk, page 119. Robert Cannon and Larry Esposito said, the accretion of an impact-generated proto-lunar disk into a single large moon is implausible. The natural expectation, based on satellite systems of other planets, would be for multiple moons to have come about, and thus explaining the formation of a single moon from an impact-generated disk becomes difficult. In other words, if it was a giant impact that caused our present moon, the theory would be that there would be multiple moons or debris around the Earth from the multiple moons. But we only have one moon as a result of the explosion that Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us. We know that there are meteor and asteroid impacts on various planets that have produced various things on different planets, anomalies on different planets. But if that is the case, then we cannot explain, or we cannot show scientifically that an impact would only produce an impact from an asteroid or giant impact from any object hitting the Earth would only produce one moon, because there's no way under ordinary circumstances, scientifically speaking, that debris can get, or a residue or debris can get out into the Earth's orbit from an impact under normal circumstances. A. Ringwood, partitioning the chromium, vanadium, and manganese, between mantles and cores of differentiating planetismal, says, observed the depletion of chromium, vanadium, and manganese in the moon are inconsistent with the hypothesis that proto-lunar material was derived from the mantle of a differentiated Mars-sized planetismal, which impacted the Earth. Indeed, the depletion of chromium, vanadium, and manganese in the moon constitute a serious and perhaps fatal obstacle to the giant impact hypothesis. So we can do away with the giant impact hypothesis, because based on the material evidence, scientific data, that the geological data that we have, there's no way that this material or elements that the Earth is depleted of, that is found on the moon, came from a Mars-sized planetesimal that hit the Earth, because these elements we are learning were already in the Earth and are abundant on the moon, which proves that the moon derived from the Earth and not from an outside giant impact hypothesis or planet hitting it. Tom Van Flanders says, and I quote, fragments from a collision site cannot get into orbit under normal circumstances. Now, the next theory, the capture theory. According to this theory, the Earth seized a fully formed moon that came close to our planet. The only problem with this is this. Tom Van Flanders says again, the gravitational capture of one body by another is implausible under normal circumstances. The last theory, the fission theory. What is this theory? According to the fission theory, it says, early in the Earth's development, it was spinning so fast. A critical overspin was reached, eventuating in a sizable chunk of the mantle being thrown off, forming the moon. The proto-lunar material would have been produced from the crustal area where the Pacific Ocean now is. The crust then split into continents and produced on the opposite side the Atlantic Ocean basin. So according to the fission theory, these scientists are trying to say that the Earth early in its origin was spinning so fast. In this critical overspin, a chunk of the moon was spin off. Well, what's the problem with this? The problem with this theory is this. Calculations have shown that for the Earth to have the necessary centrifugal force to throw off its mantle into orbit, it would have had to been rotating once every 2.5 hours. The slow accumulation of dust grains in the Earth's, or probably in the early stages of the Earth's origin, tell against this overspin. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that after the deportation of the moon, 66 trillion years ago, the Earth as we know it began to rotate 1,037 1/3 miles per hour. It now is, it makes a and not only does it makes this, travels at the rate of speed of 1,037 1/3 miles per hour and makes a rotation around the sun every 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 46 seconds. It has been doing this. And we're taught by Honorable Elijah Muhammad that the Earth is 24,896 miles, approximately 25,000 miles in circumference, and its diameter is 7,926 miles, with an abundance of water of 139,685,000 miles in water and 57,255,000 square miles of land. Now, this and weighing, the Earth weighing 6 septillion tons a unit, followed by 21 ciphers. So the Earth now, its rotation is 23 hours, 56 minutes, and 46 seconds. This rotation brings about night and day, life and death on the Earth. We also observe that the dust grains and the accumulation of dust grains in the early stages of the Earth's origin tell against this overspin. So we can do away with the fission theory that the Earth was rotating so fast, because in order for a chunk of the Earth to be thrown off, it would have to have been rotating every 2.5 hours. Space.com in 1999 says, and I quote, "Magnetic readings taken by the Lunar Perspective Probe support the increasingly popular theory that the moon had a unique and violent origin." Don't forget to zoom in when you have to, okay? Alright. Next part. Why planets just don't blow up. Scientists have not been able to explain that explosion. Of course, they talk about the KT extinction, the extinction event that destroyed the plants, the animals, the dinosaurs. We're going to get into that on another lecture. There was no such thing as dinosaurs. There were animals on the planet, but there were no giant reptiles roaming the planet. That's a lie, it's a myth. More of the white man's lies and myths that this teaching of Islam is taught by Honorable Elijah Muhammad debunks. But the KT extinction, or the mass extinction event, what destroyed almost half the plant and animal life as well as human life, was a result of the deportation of the moon. They try to explain it away, but we're going to go into that to show it was that event that caused a destruction on this earth that has never been seen before or since. Why planets just don't blow up. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said in Theology of Time in 1972, and I quote, he started drilling, meaning the God scientist trillions of years ago. He started drilling into our planet. So Allah taught me, in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, to whom praise is due forever. He drilled like a man drilling for coals, and got somewhere near halfway the planet. Then he began to pack it full of high explosives, dynamite. He said the dynamite was a higher explosive dynamite than that we're using now. The people of today use 70% dynamite, but they use 100% in splitting the earth in two and building mountains on top of the earth. In other words, the dynamite that we're using today, the enemy uses, he's only using a particular percentage of dynamite. We use 100% dynamite in the splitting of the moon trillions of years ago and building mountains on the planet. And we want to get into another talk where we talk about the mountains that are on the planet, how it was made by our scientists with a high technology of the black man used on this earth trillions of years ago. Now, the Honorable Lashon Muhammad says the original man did that. He was a god or scientist that brought about the explosion due to his dissatisfaction of not being able to have all the people alike and speaking the same dialect. He got angry because he could not make them speak the same dialect all the way around. Our planet at that time was better than 10,000 miles in diameter. Now it's around 8,000 miles in diameter. The Honorable Lashon Muhammad said he had become vexed with his own wisdom. He was unable to do with the people what he wanted to do with them, so he attempted to destroy us. This scientist tried to bring about an unnatural impossibility, because you know atmosphere has an effect on your speech. So he was trying to bring about something that he could not bring about. It was a natural impossibility that he was trying to bring about and making the people of the earth at that time speak the same language or dialect. It's just like if you live down south for 20 years and then you go up north, you'll notice the dialect is a little different. You go to north and you live there for another 40, 50, 60 years, your dialect begins to change. It won't remain the same because atmosphere has an effect on your speech and your dialect. The atmosphere, the Honorable Lashon Muhammad taught us, does that. Tom Van Flanders says, the meteor evidence indicates nuclear processes were involved, but are not hot enough in their cores for nuclear explosions, or nuclear reaction. The earth does not produce enough energy to explode on its own. It had to be an enormous amount of energy that was used or acted upon the earth by this scientist that was used in order to blast the moon from the earth. The explosion was one intrinsic to the earth, as Anthony Holloman says. It was a homegrown explosion. It happened here. What is the Cretaceous territory boundary? What is that? The Cretaceous territory boundary is a global layer of carbon deposits, usually dated to about 65 million years ago, but could be much older. This boundary indicates that the Earth experienced a global fire. The presence of the boundary layer of shock deformation features shock-altered quartz. Almost half of the genus and the genera, plant and animal species was decimated by this horrific event. As Wendy S. Holbrook has said in 1988 in her very informative Cretaceous Extinction and Cretaceous Territory Boundary, she says the Earth experienced a global fire. A global fire and a global flood as a result of that catastrophic event that took place trillions of years ago, as taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Carl O. Moses, in 1989, his geochemical perspective on the causes of periodicity of mass extinction from the Department of Geological Sciences at Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, he says, and I quote, "There is general agreement that at the Cretaceous Territory Boundary, KT, and some other boundaries, there were major changes in biochemical cycles, climate, and sea level. Mass extinctions of varying magnitude have been attributed to the environmental changes. The cause of an extinction may be internal, not external, but an internal blast, internal explosion of high volatile chemicals were used and explosives used to set this explosion off trillions of years ago. Carlo Moses goes on to say, in his geochemical perspective on the causes of periodicity of mass extinctions, he goes on to say, nevertheless, a plausible mechanism for the eruption of mantle material with enough explosive force to account for shock metamorphism has been proposed. The mechanism requires a high proportion of volatiles and a lower mantle source. So shock minerals related to such explosive volcanism would likely be associated with iridium-enriched emissions. Shock minerals remain some of the best evidence for the impacts, but a volcanic mechanism cannot be rejected without further investigation. So, volcanic eruptions. These eruptions that take the plate tectonic shifts underground, shifting land. This all was a result of this explosion that took place trillions of years ago that we feel to this day that was acted upon by one of our black scientists, of God, the Honorable Lashon Muhammad taught us, who was out of the tribe of Shabazz. We're going to talk about that tribe, our tribe, the God tribe, who resettled this planet after the explosion. This is the KT boundary. As you see, these are the shock, as Winnie S. Holbrook talked about. This is the burnt materials. Global layer of rock deposits that show that the earth went through or experienced a global fire as a result of that explosion. And I didn't add to the presentation. Maybe if I do a part 3, it would be doing the Pacific Rim, or what some call the Pacific Circle. The energy deposits around the Pacific Ocean indicates that is the place where the moon exactly were blasted from. And the earth's waters, the moon's waters fell, forming the oceans of the earth to this day. Our original planet called Moon, or Asia, as the Most Honorable Lashon Muhammad taught us, for the original man is the Asiatic black man, the maker, the owner, the cream of the planet Earth, God of the universe. The Spokane flood is evidence that a giant deluge took place. As the Honorable Lashon Muhammad taught us, he said when the moon was split from the earth, it took 6 weeks for the waters of the moon to drop to this planet. That's where you get all these myth legends that you read about. Story of Atlantis, Mu and Lemuria. When you read about ancient God Thoth, we're going to get into that. Sumeria, the legends in Sumeria that talk about the flood myths. All of these flood myths that you read about in Scandinavia, the Norse theology, and among the Atlanteans, and all of that, all these myth legends are passed down legends that were told to commemorate something that happened on this earth trillions of years ago. What you have to understand, a legend is not necessarily a lie. Legends are nothing but stories that have been passed down from generation to generation that contain truths that people try to explain about events that took place on this earth. What did the ancient accounts have to say about this cataclysmic thermonuclear catastrophic event? What did the ancients have to say about this? Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said in Theology of Time, this man, before we had the deportation from Moon, he wanted everybody to speak the same dialect. He got angry because he couldn't make them do it. Allah taught me in the person of Master Farad Muhammad that this man said, I will destroy us all. That shows you how powerful a God he was. And just to digress for a minute, some of us still think like that today, unfortunately. We can't get what we want to destroy everybody. We want to kill everybody. That's the thinking that's been in us. And Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, Yaqub was not the first god of murder. The first god of murder was that scientist that tried to blow us off the map 66 trillion years ago. So black on black violence has been going on for a long time. The original man did that, the Honorable Lashon Muhammad says. He was a god of scientist that brought about the explosion due to his dissatisfaction of not being able to have us all speak the same dialect. Since he was unable to do so, we were lucky to be on this part. The part of that, pardon me, the people on that part, Moon, were destroyed. The people that was on the part called Moon died. The earth dropped 36,000 miles in the present pocket that it is now in and began to rotate. And after that explosion, the God tribe, the head of the tribes, the tribe called Shabazz, Shabazz meaning great people or great takers, or long-lived, they resettled the planet. They resettled the planet, traveled the planet, and discovered the best part of the earth to live on. That's why our supreme wisdom said the root of civilization is in Arabia at the holy city of Mecca, which means where wisdom and knowledge of the original black man first started when the planet was found. When was the planet found? It was founded 66 trillion years ago. In the present pocket that it is now rotating in, we have to resettle it after the explosion. That's when the earth or the planet was found. And the Honorable Lashon Muhammad goes on to say that the tribe of Shabazz was the first to discover the present seat of the holy city of Mecca in the fertile Nile Valley. The divine God tribe, the most holy and most noble people on the planet, whom we are descendant of. The Honorable Lashon Muhammad said in Theology of Time, once upon a time a black man tried to destroy the black man. So Allah taught me, but he failed. He could not destroy himself because he was the creator. So he left some of us back here right on it. That was a long time ago, so God taught me. It was in the making of the moon. In his effort to destroy the black man, he caused a new world thought to come in. He split this one in two. He had taken one part and put it out before our eyes to serve as a sign. For this part, he wanted to destroy us, but he couldn't. He wanted his teaching to go like the one that went into Africa and we came from him. The Honorable Lashon Muhammad said, you might ask, who is the tribe of Shabazz? Page 31 of Message to the Black Man. The Honorable Lashon Muhammad says, they originally was the tribe that came with the earth, or this part, 66 trillion years ago, when a great explosion on our planet divided it into two parts. One we call Earth and the other Moon. This was done by one of our scientists, God, who wanted the people to speak one language, one dialect for all, but was unable to bring this about. He decided to kill us by destroying our planet, but he failed. The Honorable Lashon Muhammad goes on to say, we were lucky to be on this part. Pardon me, yes. We were lucky to be on this part, Earth, which did not lose any water in the mighty blasting away of the part called Moon. As I said earlier, originally there were 13 tribes of the black man and woman on the planet. 13. There were no brown man here. There was no red man here. There was no yellow man here. There was no Caucasian. It was just us originally. And ruled the planet, the earth. 13 tribes. One was destroyed, leaving 12. So in 1967, in a very important article on Lashon Muhammad wrote called Problem number 2, warning to the MGT and GCC, the Honorable Lashon Muhammad said 12 tribes equal the earth's inhabitants of nations. That's how many tribes were left over after the explosion when that one was destroyed. Dr. Wesley Muhammad says, in the Book of God, Encyclopedia Proof that the black man is God, he says, and I quote, ancient tradition remembers this catastrophe of a global fire and deluge, and the God who caused it. This next part, dealing with the Enuma Elish. In ancient Babylon, which is now present-day Iraq, was discovered 7 tablets. These 7 tablets were the in a sense, the Bible of the Sumerians, of ancient Mesopotamian civilization. This book, the P.E.A.C.E, deals with the history of creation, its origin, and it bears witness directly to what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has taught us of this explosion and deportation of the moon. The literary accounts bear witness. The P.E.A.C.E speaks of, more importantly, of a god named Marduk. There were 12 gods, according to Sumerian legend. These 12 were called the Anunnaki. Like the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, there were 12 gods or scientists. There were 12 major, 12 minor. The number possessing the knowledge that of God is never more than 12. And the knowledge is passed down from father to son. And the number is never more than 12. In Egypt, you call these 12 gods scientists the Paut Neteru. In Greek philosophy, they call the Olympian 12. In Islam, they call the 12 imams. The Bible refers to them as the 24 elders. In the Holy Qur'an, it refers to them as the exalted chiefs or exalted assembly. There are always 12 of them that have ruled. And Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us of that 12. The head of the other 11 is called God, or the supreme being. There has always been a supreme being that has always ruled since the beginning. There's always been one God that has ruled in 25,000 year cycles. And that's why we're taught religiously that God is one, but it has not been the same one since the beginning. That's not a subject as such as I want to go into, but at another time, dealing on the reality of the black God and the truth of the lessons as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us as Representative Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Anyway, the P.E.A.C.E speaks of that event that the messenger taught us of. In the P.E.A.C.E, the 7 tablets of creation, it talks about the god Marduk. According to the P.E.A.C.E, it speaks of, at that time, the earth, they called it, was Tiamat. And according to the P.E.A.C.E legend, Tiamat, her waters rebelled against Marduk. The waters rebelled against him. So to bring Tiamat, or the earth, the waters rebelling represent how at that time the scientists